We're back with another episode of the Nebraska Football Show. I'm Tim Verghese, joined as always by Steve Marik. Steve, bye week. How'd you enjoy your bye week?
I spent my bye week with minimal college football watching, which was tough, but with a 2-year-old at home, it's a little difficult to do that. She does not care about college football at all. So we watched some other stuff and went to the park and played around. It was actually a really nice Saturday. I'm glad I did that because usually my Saturdays are chock full away from home and everything like that. So it was really cool to spend some time with the daughter and go to the park, do some swings, go down some slides up there. It was awesome. What about you?
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, again, I think ours look a little different because I'm on my own, no kids. So I can kind of enjoy the college football Saturday.
Mhm.
But yeah, like went out with some friends and was able to just watch a couple different games and spend Sunday just doing things with a girlfriend. Like, just had a good time, had a good weekend of just what I feel like most normal people's weekends look like, not
I
our
know.
crazy weekends. So
So
that was
so
nice.
Tim, so Tim, who was which game kind of like was most fun for you? I did catch
Oh.
a little bit at the end of the Oregon Ohio State game because it was kind of later at night. But what was the top one for you?
I think for me it was Oregon, Ohio State. We had that one
Yeah.
on at the same time as Ole Miss, LSU, and both were just going back
Mm.
and forth. But I think Oregon, Ohio State, just because I feel like we learned a good bit about both teams. Wanted to see with Ohio State, just like at the end of the day, I've told you behind the scenes, and I felt like the only thing holding this Ohio State team back from a national championship this year is the coaching staff and the mentality that's instilled down from the coaching staff,
Sure.
where pretty much since 2020 or so under Ryan Day, when it gets to like an even playing field, when they're playing a team that like is on par with them talent wise, or it's in a big moment, they always come up short. It's just
Hmm.
and it feels like a coaching thing. It feels like they played. There were critical mistakes late in that game. There was obviously sliding down when the clock's hitting zero,
Yeah.
like things like that. Like the controversial OPI, like, but that's not something you do in that moment. You play it safe there. So I just think it's one of those things where maybe they learn to adjust. Maybe the new Big Ten schedule gives them these tests early enough this year where they haven't even played Michigan yet. They haven't played Penn State yet. So it's like, maybe they use this to bounce back. But man, if you're Ohio State, you really have no real excuses. You've got the best roster money can buy, literally. You've got a real good roster. You have a bunch of senior experience on both sides of the ball. Guys came back. JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, Denzel Burke. Those guys came back for another year, and it they lost on they were supposed to go undefeated this year, and they lost in a game that was very winnable. Credit to Oregon. I think having their best game of the season so far. I mean, it feels like so long ago we were talking about them struggling the first week of the year, and it's like, oh man, is this the most overrated team in the country? And here
Hmm.
they are, pulling out the win that they did. I think the Big Ten in general learning to
Hmm.
respect Austin.
Yeah. I mean, the Big Ten is kind of unpredictable right now. There's a lot of kind of scores floating around this
Yeah,
from this past weekend that makes you think like, man, is this is up for grabs right now?
right. And I know you didn't get to see it, but like, what do you make of for Nebraska specifically? What do you make of like that Illinois Purdue game? Like Purdue taking Illinois to overtime when those two teams looked like two completely different trajectories when Nebraska play them both. It's like again, I think this conference right now, I think the biggest lesson is that the gaps are as close as they've ever
Yeah.
been.
Yeah.
The separation between the obviously the real good teams are on kind of in their tier of their own, but that middle of the pack, Illinois down pretty much. It feels like anybody can get. I think Michigan down too. Like from Michigan down to the rest of the conference, anybody can get anybody every given week. And on one hand, it's a good thing for Nebraska with the schedule they have coming up, but also it's like, what do you make of this conference right now? Like, where does Nebraska kind of fit in?
Just like Matt Rule told us on Monday, forget the logos, man. It does not matter who you're playing. The other team has scholarship guys too. And the level of football being played by young people these days is just elevated, I feel like. And everybody's got good coaches, everybody's got good players. It does not matter if you have that P on your helmet for Purdue and you didn't look like you were alive the first half of the season. You can still kind of go into somebody's house and play well and play a football game and make things happen in the fourth quarter and make things close. I've never been on the train of like, back, when I was in high school, if Nebraska was playing like Illinois or Purdue or somebody like that, everybody would just chalk it up as a win because, it's Purdue, it's Illinois. Who cares about those guys? They're never good. Not anymore, man. Not anymore. It was never even like that before, I think. Like everybody's just got dudes. Everybody's got players. Everybody's got coaches. Coaches are smart. Players can play. It's not just, the days of, I think, the top tier one or two teams in the Big Ten just running the show. I think it's over. And the transfer portal has something to do with that. NIL is making an impact with that, kind of spreading the wealth around with everybody. I don't know. I just think coaches are smart. Everybody's got good players. It's just going to be a grind all season long.
Yeah, and I think it's only going to, at least the level of competition is only going to increase when revenue sharing gets implemented,
Sure.
when,
Yeah.
the Purdue's and the Illinois and the Indianas of the world suddenly have 22 million or so to work with, from Big Ten TV money and to share across their roster. Like that's game changing for some of these Big Ten programs that are just trying to keep up with the Ohio States and Oregons. Obviously, it's game changing for Nebraska, who already has a very solid NIL pool, but having that 22 million to kind of split and kind of even the playing field a bit, I think it's going to help a bunch of these rosters. And for a team like Nebraska, for a team like Indiana and Illinois, where those rosters are built up by camaraderie, built up by like the belief in the team. I think they only benefit from an even playing field when it comes from a money standpoint, where you don't have to go out and pay everybody. Everyone's kind of set to a certain limit, so the best rosters are the ones that are kept together. And I think Nebraska's doing a good job early on of doing that and preparing for that world. But I think a lot of teams in the Big Ten are. I think a lot of, like, Wisconsin, I think is doing a really good job. Indiana's doing a good job. Like you're saying, I don't think I think the future of this conference looks really, really competitive.
It looks fun. It looks really fun. And
Yeah,
just again, the coast to coast travel too, that impacts things. We've already seen how the away teams in these Big Ten games are really kind of struggling on the road because they're traveling across two time zones. It's really hard to get on a plane and go across the country and go win a football game against a team that doesn't have to do that and just stays home. So there's a lot of different new elements in this new Big Ten, and it creates for a more competitive league.
for sure. I wanted to ask you real quick before we dive into and get into some Indiana preview. There was an interesting comment by Jed Fish over the weekend where he kind of mentioned he wants to stick even when the rosters expand to 105 scholarships and you're kind of capped at 105. He wants to stick to 85 to increase the amount of money that's able to go across his roster. How
Mhm.
do you feel about that? In a big, Jed Fish came from Arizona, coach of the Pac-12, has bounced around a little bit. How do you feel about that comment? Because I don't know if 80, just straight only 85 players is enough depth in the Big Ten.
Yeah, we've seen how much injuries can impact a team, and football is a violent game. Injuries are going to happen. So it. I don't know. It's something that a storyline is still developing, I guess. But as of right now, I don't know. I kind of I'm not against the idea by any means. I definitely see where Jed Fish is coming from. But again, it's going to be about are the players going to be okay with that? Are you going to try to find like a quality backup who can come in and kind of like do it that way? I'm not sure. But Jed Fish is a good guy. He's a good head coach. He's a smart guy. I don't know. I'm kind of just thinking through this right now, but it's a it's kind of a work in progress thing right now. I think everybody's going to have different ways of doing it, but I don't think it's the worst idea in the world. But again, I keep going back to the buy-in of how's that going to affect his recruiting? How's that going to affect his portaling? When you're kind of that's going to be part of your pitch on the in the portal trail and the recruiting trail. So I'm not totally against that idea, but I think it could be doing things that way could maybe have some bad effects in his program, some good ones too, maybe. I don't know. What do you think?
Right. I don't know about like capping yourself to 85 when you have another 30 spots to work with. And I think he's probably realistically probably going to live in that, maybe not living at 105 consistently, but living in that 90 to 95-ish range. Um, I'm more than anything, I think I'm curious to see how this is going to work, because like
Yeah.
travel rosters are what, 75 right
Yeah.
now?
like
like
73,
73.
73 ish. It's
Right.
around
So
there.
it's like I understand the strategy. It was like, hey, listen, on road games we are only limited to this amount anyway. What more do
Yeah.
we need? But
Hmm.
on the flip side, you have like a philosophy like Nebraska's, where it's like, hey, we want 150 plus guys if we can get it, because we want as much depth as we possibly can to practice against and develop and have a wider pool to, like, hey, we're developing 5 or 6 of these guys at this one position that have upside that 2, 3 years down the line could look good. We're banking on, if we have 150, we have the depth to have 6 of these developmental type guys at this position. One of these guys is sure to that's kind of the strategy. It feels like is kind of taking a bunch of swings when you have the roster that Nebraska currently does. The back end of it specifically, I'm talking about like roster spots 120 plus. Like how those guys are being used. I think that's the strategy compared to, like, an Indiana or a Washington, where it's like, okay, let's cap ourselves to this. And I'm also curious, once we get to that point, how does this look like? Are we going to get a practice squad? Or is there
Yeah.
going to be a group of, like, guys that technically aren't on scholarship? Like, are you capped to 105 scholarships, but then you can have a team of like 20, 25-ish of walk-ons, just to be your, like, quote unquote practice squad? Like, I don't know how that's going to work.
And are those players going to be okay with it? Like
Right.
for their college football careers. That's why I keep going back to the buy-in with everything with these kids, because they have more options now than ever before. And so, programs are going to do it their own ways in different ways, and nothing's going to be done the same way. So the programs that kind of figure out the best way first might benefit with that. But yeah, I mean, having your own kind of guys dedicated for the scout team and everything, it's like how many guys are going to be okay doing that? Are they going to think that they want to be on the field on Saturdays, and are they just going to be, living that walk on life and, getting their bodies crushed every week, but not playing in games, all for the better of the program? I don't know. I think it's going to be difficult, but Matt Rule has shown that it's going to come down to coaches who can just create that buy-in and get kids to kind of just see the vision of the program and see that, hey, you are a part of the team. Even though you're not out there on Saturdays, you are still helping the team that is out there on Saturdays win, and we're all in this thing together. So it's just going to be very interesting. Every program is going to do it differently. It's going to be very, very intriguing to see the different ways that everybody comes up with this thing.
For sure. And we'll have more time to dive into, bigger picture questions like this in the off season. But yeah, let's transition over into previewing this upcoming game. Nebraska got Indiana in Bloomington on Saturday. Steve, I guess initial thoughts, I want to just throw it to you. You've been doing your previews, watching. I think we both watched a couple Indiana games over the weekend. Well, how do you feel about this team, a couple of days out at this point?
Indiana can ball. Tim, I like it. I like their setup right now. Obviously, there's a heavy James Madison influence on this offense and defense. Obviously, with Kurt Signetti coming from James Madison, I think all but like 3 of his full time assistants came from James Madison as well. So everywhere you look on this roster, there's a James Madison transfer making impacts, and just transfers everywhere making impacts. The most obviously Curtis Rourke, the quarterback, the Maple Missile. They're calling him. He's a Canadian-born quarterback who spent 5 years at Ohio. So this is his 6th year playing college football. That tells you a lot right there. He's an experienced guy. He's kind of seen and done it all in college football. So Nebraska's going to be playing its best offense to date, and I'm saying that knowing that they have already played Colorado, but it's just, I don't know. It's an old team. The offensive line is okay. I really like their center. He's a 6-year guy. The rest of the offensive line for Indiana is filled with like 3rd-year guys. I think there's a 5th-year guy in there. The running backs are old transfers. Ellison, the transfer from Wake Forest, very strongly built, low to the ground, 210 pounds, around 5'10", runs very hard. Tyson Lawton is a James Madison transfer, 5'9", 210 pounds, runs really hard. He's like a 7th-year guy. I think he's 25 years old, Tim, 25-year old running back, and he runs like it too. So I don't know. There everywhere you look, there's dudes on offense is what I'm trying to say. Elijah Sherratt, we can talk about him. He comes from James Madison as well, and then before that, Elon. So it's a offense that I think is very fun to watch. They got the counter run game going last 2 weekends ago against Northwestern. Indiana's coming off a bye, just like Nebraska is. So it's going to be really interesting. I think there's opportunity for Nebraska in the run game against Indiana's defense, which has kind of a small, in my opinion, a little bit of a small defensive front. So I'm wondering if that's where Nebraska's going to want to attack and kind of build from off of that. So yeah, I mean, Tim, what are your thoughts on Indiana? I think they can ball. I think that offense is going to put up points, and it might be on Nebraska to keep pace.
Yeah, that's kind of my feel too. Like I think the more I watch, and it's like, okay, you're trying to figure it out with the schedule they've played,
Yeah.
with some of that experience, what is real about this team, and that offense is legit. I think they may not have the high end playmakers that like Colorado did, but they're more
Hmm.
balanced. I
They're
think they
older.
get older. Yep, that's a
Hmm.
big part of it.
Yes.
And again, that's not to take away anything from their skill weapons. I think they've got 3, 4 guys that are really talented.
Hmm.
Like there's Miles Cross, Miles Price. I covered Miles Price in high school. He went and played at Texas Tech, and transferred up. He's a really talented player, and that's like their fourth or fifth receiver. Right now. They've got a really good room right now offensively, and I think they do a good job of. I've kind of said it when I've talked about them a couple of different places, but I feel like the biggest thing about them is they play as a unit. They play very disciplined football, and it feels like every single play is like, okay, all 11 of our guys are going to beat all 11 of your guys to our
Hmm.
assignment, and that's just how we're going to beat you. I don't think they do anything necessarily super complicated or
Yeah.
interesting
Hmm.
offensively or even defensively. Like, not interesting, but it's just fundamental football. Like, it's just they execute the
They're good
fundamentals
at
of
what they
what.
do. They're
Yeah,
good at what they do. Kurt Signetti is an offensive guy. He came up through his coaching career on the offensive side, coaching receivers, quarterbacks, spent some time at Alabama, working under Nick Saban. And there's a heavy RPO influence with this offense, and they got the quarterback to do it. Curtis Rourke, he's 6'5", 230 pounds. He's a little bit mobile too. Even though he's got that big knee brace on his right knee, I believe he's still mobile, and that can hurt a defense. But when he's reading whether it's a safety or a linebacker in the box, he's pulling that thing. He is throwing darts over the middle of the field, and that's usually to Elijah Schrott. They're 6'3", 205 sturdy belt receiver over middle. A lot of Elijah Schrott's targets come over the middle of the field. So that's something that, John Bullock, Javen Wright is finally healthy and able to see the field and get more snaps. This is a Javen Wright game, in my opinion, because Indiana's going to want to throw the football. They're very balanced. I just don't want to say they're going to just throw the football against Nebraska. They're a very balanced offense. They've got actually three really good hard running backs. But Tim, we can just talk about it because the level of defense that Indiana has played so far is not
yeah.
Nebraska.
I was going to say
Yeah,
if
Nebraska
there's
is. Yeah, I have the stats right now. So Indiana has played Florida International, Western Illinois, FCS program, UCLA, Charlotte, Maryland, and Northwestern. Northwestern is the best defense that they have played so far, and they are ranked 27th in the country in scoring defense. Florida International is ranked 95th. They are giving up 28 points per game. Western Illinois, it's just really, really struggling program. FCS ball, they're giving up 45 points per game. UCLA is giving up 28 points per game. They are 95th ranked in the country. Charlotte is giving up 31 points per game. They are ranked 111th in the country. Maryland is giving up 24 points per game. They are ranked 74th. And then Northwestern, best defense that Indiana has played to date. The Wildcats are giving up 19 points per game, and that's 27th. So what I'm trying to say is Curtis Rourke has not seen a defense like Nebraska's, and so that's where the game is going to be played. Indiana's offense versus Nebraska's defense, because I think Nebraska's offense can do a little something against Indiana's defense. So Indiana's offense, Nebraska's defense, it's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, the last 2 weeks it's felt like the games have been won by the defense.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of sticking to their assignments and eventually hold like, against Purdue. It was just keep getting stops until the offense finally woke up. And then against Rutgers, it was the offense was awake and then the offense kind of died. And so the defense kind of had to keep Nebraska up ahead. This feels like a week where it's like, okay, you have to hope the offense is able to keep answering. And on the defensive side of the ball, they have to be ready. You know what I mean? And that's what like I think Nebraska needs to get a couple stops. I think that like
Mm-hmm.
Matt Rule said it on Monday, they need to steal a turnover or steal a possession. I think that's really important in this game. Yeah, I think even more so than I think this game being won by Nebraska's defense against Indiana's offense. I think this game is won once again on the line. I think
Yes.
Indiana's line is offensive line is gettable. I
Yeah, they're all
think
right.
Nebraska's defensive line and defensive front specifically is going to have a chance to get after Curtis a little bit. Um, on the other side of the ball, it's like you said, I think they're a little small.
Hmm.
And I think Nebraska's going to have an opportunity. Like this is another game where it's like, hey, if you can't run the ball here, you got to look at them coming off a bye. Like you
Hmm.
have to be able to run the ball this week.
And this is coming from just yesterday where Matt Rule has talked about the run game, that traditional handoff run game with the running backs. He wants more explosive plays. He wants those 4 yards, 4 yarders, although 4 yarder, 4 or 5 yarders are great. Most times have those turn into 12 and those 12 turn into 50 and that 50 turn into 80. So, but yeah, I'm glad you mentioned we can talk about Indiana's defensive front. So the two main edge guys for the Hoosiers, Mikhail Kamara, James Madison transfer, and Linnell Carr. Mikhail Kamara is leading the team in tackles for loss and sacks. I think he has like 5 sacks right now. 6'1", 265 pounds. Linnell Carr, 6'2", 246. So those are your two starting edge rushers for Indiana. Then the interior guys, I have about four of them. James Carpenter, another James Madison transfer. He's 6'2", 288. Marcus Burris, a former Texas A&M transfer, 6'5", 286. CJ West, who's a Kent State transfer, he's a lone 300-pounder. He's 6'2", 317. And then another James Madison transfer, Tyreek Tucker, he's 6', 298. So, Tim, I mean, this is the game to get that handoff run game going, to make some hay in that run game. Have Indiana's defense really focus on stopping those running backs. And then once that happens, obviously Dylan Raiola down the field with those big targets, Jamal Banks, Isaiah Nair. Isaiah Nair, I wouldn't be surprised if Marcus Satterfield wants to get Isaiah Nair some touches right away in this game, just because of how his past few games have gone. He started the season really well, but then recently, he's had some drops, he's had some completions go through his hands or get ripped out of his hands. So I think they want Isaiah Nair to get back to the Isaiah Nair of the first half of the season. So, but yeah, Indiana's defensive front. This is going to be something that I'm keeping my eyes on with Nebraska and how they run the ball with those running backs.
Yeah, like this feels like a game where Nebraska's talked about dominating time of possession. This is a game where you kind of want to be able to do this. This
Sure.
is how you win the game. You win the
Keep them
game
on the
by
sideline. Keep Rourke
yep,
on the
keep
sideline. Hmm.
exactly keep that Indiana offense off the field. Get your defense, keep your defense rested for late games. This is a game for Nebraska. It feels like I think my three keys, which it's a keys in any game, but specifically this one, punch them in the mouth early. I think
Yes.
Nebraska has to get like that first,
On the
like draw
road.
first
Always
blood.
got to do that.
Yep,
And it's going to be a
especially on
sold
the
out.
road.
Indiana announced it's
Yep.
going to be a sold out crowd. There's some juice behind Indiana football right now. Kurt Sitnetti is good at doing that. Obviously, it's pretty simple. I win. Google me. That quote was awesome. I love it. He's able to do that right now with as much winning as he's done in his career. But yeah, it's sorry to cut you off, Tim, but I just enjoy a fun atmosphere, and I think that's what's going to be in Bloomington. So this is going to be a very good test for
Yeah,
Nebraska on
absolutely.
the road.
Absolutely. And this is a team, I think they pride themselves on winning, on playing winning football.
Hmm.
And, I what can lead to is, they have not really faced a lead or a deficit this year, like a serious deficit. So it's like if you punch them in
Yeah.
the mouth and you do land some body blows, what do they feel like? Are they able to rally? I trust that, Kurt's going to be able to get his guys, so many of them that came with him from James
Yeah.
Madison to
Hmm.
rally and be okay. But we have not seen that yet. I want to see this team, this Indiana team, have to play from behind a little bit.
Yeah, and really, the fun thing that I kind of noticed when I was watching that Northwestern game of Indiana's was Indiana didn't run away with that win. I mean, Northwestern, again, credit to David Braun. I love that guy. I feel like he gets the most out of what he has at Northwestern right now. He might not win all the games, but he's gonna have his guys ready to show up and ready to play football. Indiana didn't run away. Indiana led 17-10 at halftime, and it was 24-17 at the start of the fourth quarter. So it was a tight game. And tight games in the second half, Indiana has really shown that they can control the second half. I have them here. So in the second half, this season for Indiana, they have outscored their opponents 139 to 41 in second halves. And then to creep it down a little bit more, to narrow it down a little bit more into fourth quarters, Indiana has outscored their opponents 80 to 17. So they have really controlled the second halves. And as we've seen with Nebraska, their second halves have been kind of hit or miss, right? I mean, they didn't score a point against Rutgers in the second half at all. And then before that with Purdue was kind of the opposite, where they did a lot of the scoring in the second half. So second half is going to be really interesting. Indiana has shown that it can do those well. Nebraska has been kind of inconsistent with those. So how you finish the game, that's what Matt Rule talks about all the time. To get out of the win, to get out of Bloomington with the win, Nebraska is really going to have to finish the game.
Yeah, I have to play 4 quarters, I think,
Mm-hmm.
of good ball on Saturday. Yeah, and Indiana's favored. I think rightly so. I think going into
Yes.
this game, I would also
Yep.
have
They should
Indiana
be.
favored. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but this feels like a one score-ish game again. This
Mm-hmm.
feels like another one where, or like even if it's not the final score, may not be a one score. I think there's going to be late game situations where they're locked into a one score battle, and then one team either pulls away from the other, or vice versa. Like I think this is a game where we're looking at like a 35-24 type final score, 35-21, like a two-ish type score because one of the two teams pulls away late.
Yeah, I definitely think it's going to be a one score game. I don't. Again, I go back to Indiana's offense versus Nebraska's defense. Curtis Rourke, this offense has not seen a defense like Nebraska's yet this season. So, and all the pieces that Indiana has right now, they're fun and cool. But Nebraska's got some dudes on defense too. So Nebraska's pass defense and the pass rush, getting home to Curtis Rourke is going to be very important. And we can go through some of our players that we're going to watch here soon.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know we've talked a lot about the offense, so we can kind of focus defensively, just individuals you're kind of watching. Who are you looking at defensively this week?
Mikhail Kamara for Indiana. Keep an eye on that guy. 7.5 tackles for loss, 5 sacks. He came over from James Madison. He was an all Sun Belt pick last year. He had 17.5 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks, and a team high 3 forced fumbles. This guy is a dude. He plays hard. Nebraska's ball carriers are really going to have to protect the football when he's near them because he whacks at it, he scrapes at it, he rips at it, he punches at it. He's a really good dude. 6'1", 265. He's just built low to the ground. He's thick. He's strong. And Nebraska's tackles, Turner Corcoran, Gunnar Gatula, Bryce Benhart, they're going to have their hands full with him. So keep an eye on Mikhail Kamara.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that he's the one leading that front. He kept drawing my eye every time I watched them.
Yes.
He's a guy that you
Now he's
just
good.
keep. Yeah, good. I'm looking in the back end. I'm watching D'Angelo Pons and
Yeah.
mainly just one. I think he's their best corner.
Mm-hmm.
A guy that could have had a couple of different options when he left. James Madison chose to follow Kurt. But we could have gone to a couple of different places. Could have even gone to the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a guy that more than anything, I'm curious to see where he lines up.
Yep.
You look at him physically, he's like 5'9". You
Mm-hmm.
think he's going to be a guy that they're going to line up on Ja'Cory Barney and Jalen Lloyd and try and erase those guys. But he's mainly played outside this year,
Yes.
and I that's another thing where I'm curious to see how does Indiana match Nebraska's length at receiver because they haven't
Mm-hmm.
faced two receivers like Jamal Banks and Isaiah Noor just in terms of size and speed this year. How they match that is what I'm very curious, and obviously, D'Angelo Pons factors very, very, very much into that defense. And so again, how they use him if it's a situation where okay, he's kind of covering the slot, Nebraska's going to have a less
Yes.
experienced DB on their top two receivers. That
Mm-hmm.
benefits Nebraska a little bit. But what they do with D'Angelo Pons, I'm very curious to see. He leads the team in passes deflected. I think he's got an interception on the season. Been very active. I like his game. He's the type of scrappy corner I like.
Yes.
Scrappy little corner that
Mm-hmm.
plays bigger than his size. That's
Mm-hmm.
willing to get physical. I just like watching him play. And I think closing this conversation, like, it, is there anything we haven't talked about where you feel like this game is decided? Like, is there any other element of this game where there's a clear advantage one way or the other?
Well, I mean, if we both think it's going to be a one score game and a tight Big Ten game, special teams come into play, and right now, and you'd have to give that edge to Indiana. If we're talking about field goals, especially, obviously Brian Bruschini, he's got his black shirt. He's coming off one of his best performances of his life, maybe in a football game against Rutgers, with how he put on his Superman cape and kind of did a lot for the team. But yeah, I mean, Nebraska is just going to have to figure something out with field goals, and maybe if it comes to it, maybe go for some fourth downs. If they feel like that's a better option right now, and it might be, who knows? But yeah, special teams is it's going to be one to watch too, especially if we think it's going to be a one score game late.
For sure. I think I'm looking for early, Nebraska holding onto the football, trying to establish that run,
Hmm.
like we talked
Hmm.
about, finding the matchups. I think this is about one-on-one matchups at out wide,
Yes.
finding the favorable matchups out wide. And yeah, I think I would start to get a little concerned if that first half Nebraska is going three and out a couple of times. You have to keep matching them. You
Hmm.
have to score some points because they can do it at any point. So I think you take as many points as you can get. I think, we've seen Nebraska play a little conservative around the 40s, where it's like, hey, third or fourth and three, and it's like at the 50-yard line. It's like, oh, they're punting it. Or, fourth and three, even inside the 50, and they're punting it. Like, this is the game where, fourth down in that middle of the field, it may benefit you to go for it. I understand trying to flip the field and use Bushini to your advantage, but this is a
Hmm.
game where you need as many points as possible. And I think for Nebraska, it's about taking some risk and being a little aggressive because you're playing as the underdog. You might as well.
Yeah, and if you have a quarterback that you really believe in, like Dylan Raiola, turn him loose, let him rip
Yeah,
it.
I was going to say, yeah, and last thing here, kind of, how do you feel like Dylan had his worst performance of his young
Yeah,
career so far
yeah.
before the bye week. Coming out of the bye, I kind of feel like he's going to try and bounce back. But also with the understanding now that he doesn't need to be the savior, that Nebraska's defense can keep them in games. What are you expecting to see from Dylan on Saturday?
We talked about this in our other pod, Tim, but I'm super excited to see how what the response looks like from Dylan Raiola, because we know he's a good quarterback and we know he's going places in football. But against Rutgers is really the first time that we've seen him struggle and make some really bad decisions. How does he respond? I think that he operates already like professional, with the way he prepares and the way he watches film and the way he just goes about life in general. He looks and sounds like a NFL quarterback already, in my opinion. So how he comes back from this, especially off a bye, where he has some time to heal up. I'm sure there are some bumps and bruises with him, but I'm confident that things are going to look good with Dylan Raiola. I'm confident that he's going to successfully and consistently move the offense through the air, and maybe get him some opportunities in the run game on some third and one, some third and twos where he can quick pull the ball and just get down once he gets the first down. I think those benefit him too, to get him just get him hit a little bit and get him in the game, get him ready to go. I think those little things benefit him. But I'm very confident in Dylan Raiola for whatever reason. I just have the gut feel that he's going to come out ready to ball.
Yeah, and I think it also says a lot. Matt Rule said on Monday he woke him up in his off, or Dylan woke him up
Yeah,
in his office at 4:30 in the morning. So tells you about how much preparation the freshman's doing
exactly.
for this
Mhm.
game, and obviously how much Matt Rule's doing for this game. The fact that he's sleeping in his office, and you know,
They recognize how big of a game this is. And before
yeah,
the season, a lot of people probably didn't look at Nebraska at Indiana on October 19th and think, oh, Big Ten game. It is. I mean, this is a big game for Nebraska, especially with the ranked opponent. And everybody talking about this fancy offense. I think Tony White's going to want to win this thing and limit the offense. And I think Matt Rule recognizes how big of an opportunity this is.
for sure. We'll be back later this week with bold predictions for the game and our final score predictions. So stay tuned for that. But that'll do it for us here at the Nebraska Football Show. We'll see you next week.
See ya.